Well, a model that you might start to look at is this is Cowitz and Smith's students' form of development. And when you look at this, you can say, well, that's pretty obvious. You know, it's, a lot of these things aren't very complicated. But what it does is allows us to look at one of the things, a couple of the things a student moves along through their learning experience. The first level, the learner has little knowledge, they're very instructor dependent, and they're requiring methods, relationships, the processes, they're memorizing all the plants. All along when we talk about learning objectives, we should never forget that it's not about not memorizing things. There are things in every profession that you have to memorize. We all know what the third level looks like. This is when we have the student independent. The student is out there leading in the field, particularly at the graduate level. We hope that our students are becoming experts. In fact, in many cases, they will know more than we do about that particular area. What's really hard, and this is where the controversy in instructional development, because I spent years as the director of the teaching center, I got into these long discussions about where do you put your, so to speak, best instructors. Do they end up at the early level, as many people would claim, or do they end up as these transitional coaches mentors in the second level? Getting students, letting them go, giving them some freedom, a little tether, but not too much, going to hold them back just a little bit. This is something that we come back to a couple different times. Well, when you start looking at this as a diagram, you have years of the curriculum. This is not the first year necessarily. It's just in zones. Here are the various Cowitz and Smith levels as we go along. The curriculum realms as they move through years. And one of the more important things is that in the model, you start to give the suggested ways in which it's taught. Because I serve on the chair on the Landscape Architecture Accreditation Board visiting teams, I go to a lot of universities, and you see very quickly, if you're aware of this, that very often we teach the first year of a program the same way we teach the fourth year of the program. The instructor behaviors, the student responses end up being very similar. Now, we like to think that doesn't happen, but it really does. We also look at various ways in which assessment takes place, and this model then forms the basis of how we begin to plot out a strategy. Well, the way in which that happens is that there are, and traditionally, you've probably heard this, there's knowledge, skills, and values. Knowledge, skills, and values, and landscape architecture, I think, got a little out of whack. They ended up with, what was it, knowledge, skills, and attributes, or something like that, which it makes it very difficult in that body of knowledge study to move it into a curriculum because it gets rather confusing. Gronlund, based on the work of Bloom and Krathwohl and others, speaks to the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domains. There's a wonderful little book. I give it to anybody that comes near me. It's in I think this is the 6th edition. I think it's in its 9th edition now. And it really I know it sounds like, oh God, this sounds like, this doesn't very interesting. Well, it's not very interesting. It's not very interesting except for the fact that because you can get into, how do you parse down what is a goal and objectives and the mission and that sort of thing. But what happens is it has different components of Bloom's taxonomy. And what we do is we have then at the beginning we have knowledge, which is the lower level, which is, by the way, they don't use knowledge, skills, and values. And they move upwards through this, in this case downward, but it's to the upper levels then of where we would like to see our students in that zone 3. We'd like to see them over on the synthesis and evaluation stage. In the affective domain, here they come. These are the values. And what's important, and it wasn't on the last slide, for some reason it dropped it off, but if you can just sort of look over here, what's really important is that as you begin to work on the curriculum and look at the way in which the various syllabi are developed, you start to use the verbs. Whoops. I see what you mean. And you look at the instructional objectives from beginning at the beginning, let's say under values, listens attentively, and down here displays, safety consciousness, maintains good health habits, those kinds of values. And we can translate, we've translated those many times into landscape architecture. The next is psychomotor skills. Skills are one it's often misused terms because we talk about teamwork skills and team building skills, and they're really not skills. I mean, teamwork is really both a cognitive and an affective. It's really more about values and the valuing the opinions of others and working with a degree of respect. Skills very often is the psychomotor, is very often the manipulation of stuff and how well you can actually do those kinds of things. And they start off at perception in the lower level and work to origination at the upper levels. Again, you may want to just look at some of the verbs over here. So what does it look like at the end? Well, you take the domains, you take the various areas, and you start to define by learning objective then what it is in that zone, in the first zone, in the dependent learning zone, what it is that you're talking about. Appreciate the role and values and their effect on creative thinking. Effective level 3. And if you go back to those charts, and I can't show you them all at the same time, but you have to do it sort of with 3 things on the table. And then, by connecting them, by showing the connections between one objective and another, you make sure that they end up being in the same, so to speak, course or module or learning opportunity or whatever it is that you're talking about. And this is what really you want to come out of it. You want to come out of it because of the fact that we have more and more adjunct professors, people coming in teaching. You want them to say, okay, what are the expected learning outcomes from this course in the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor? What are the course connections in other places? What are the technical needs, and what's the program description? And I know I'm going to do this because it's going to be kind of absurd, but if you want to know what it looks like, and I gave a copy to Jack one time, this is kind of what it looks like at the end. All right? This is the way, with this, then looking at it, there's our little chart up above that we looked at of the 3, and then we have the connections that are made between the various learning objectives in the various domains, and at the end we can say, did we actually do that? So the assessment technique then is not based on necessarily wholly on the student output. The assessment techniques are really based on what it is that you went off to do in the first place. So it gives us that opportunity.